You can read a job posting and sure, it'll list out the tasks that you're expected to do and the education maybe or experience they're expected to have, but you're really not going to get a good sense of the day to day of things like, what is the amount of pressure for deadlines or what is the team dynamic like?
Hey, Gabby, welcome to the show.
Hey, Max. Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, likewise. We talked offline. It's good to speak to another Torontonian, right? So, like, I'm speaking
Yeah,
to people in
absolutely.
other parts of Canada, U.S., UK, Australia. So it's always good to talk to someone in the same like city because we can relate to like different things in the area, right? So,
Absolutely. I feel lucky to even meet somebody from Canada, let alone, the same city. You get some Vancouver people sometimes, and I'm excited enough that there's another Canadian, but it's good to meet another local.
yeah, for sure. Like, do you have your own podcast show, or is it more of you guesting?
Yeah, I do have my own podcast show, actually. Thanks for asking. It's called Mindset Over Matter, if you're willing to check it out.
And then like all the guests you get are like they're all over the place, right? So every so often you get one from Toronto, but most of the time it's like all over the globe.
All over the globe, and that's awesome because I think that the more that we can interact with people from different parts of the world, the more we can learn from each other, right? So it's really great.
Yeah, it also provides a different perspective that you may not get by just talking to people in your area, right?
100%. Yeah.
So I wanted to bring on the podcast because my podcast is about helping people overcome common career challenges, whatever it may be. And one of the common career challenges is career transitioning from either a different role or a different industry. And from us talking offline, you've done multiple pivots, so to speak. So I won't spoil like the career trajectory that you've had. I would like for you to share it. So why don't you start off with like how you started your career off, and then we can start going through your journey there.
Sure. Yeah. So I guess I usually start with high school. So coming out of high school, I'm an only child, so I don't have any older siblings, unfortunately, to kind of guide me on certain paths. And so I say that because I felt like I entered university life with very limited information on what was available out there, and so I definitely had a little bit of that mindset of, my options are basically to be a doctor, lawyer, or a teacher, or an engineer maybe. And so that's what I decided to work towards, just because I felt like those were my only options. And I didn't really know what else was out there. So I started my university career with an acceptance into medical sciences, which turned out to be entirely not what I thought it would be. And so I did end up being one of those people that switched my undergraduate focus a couple of times. So I switched from that into psychology in my second year, and with a minor in French, and that I knew was just sort of I don't really know what I'm doing, so I'm going to just do what I'm interested in for a year and kind of figure it out after that. And then around the same time, of course, with extra university stress, I decided to hit the gym a little bit more often. And I met a lot of really cool people in the health industry, health and fitness industry. And so I decided to actually pursue that as my education. So I finished my undergraduate degree with a degree in kinesiology, where for folks that aren't from Canada, I'm learning that not everybody knows what that means. So it's a degree where you learn about the human body and movement, and I worked with or learned about sports injuries and things like that. So I ended up working as a strength and conditioning coach for several years with that degree, which I loved. I loved that work for lots of different reasons, which we can get into. But after doing that for about 5 or 6 years, I think, I was actually going to be moving out on my own and paying on all my own bills by myself. And my family, who had all the best intentions, said, your income is not really stable because, in the summertime, the gym's kind of slower. We're not doing as much personal training and things. And so your paycheck's not stable. So maybe look for something a little bit more steady. So I actually ended up going into banking, which was the most stable thing we could think of. And so that transition was actually kind of fascinating. And the interview actually to get from one to the other was the longest that I've ever had, and actually the longest that the person interviewing me had ever had. So that was really a big learning experience. And then, so I worked at the branch for a couple of years, or a few years actually, working with the end client on a bunch of different things, opening bank accounts, doing mortgages and investments and loans. And then after that, I ended up moving specifically into the asset management division of the bank. So dealing specifically with investments only. And then now I'm actually in more of a strategy role within that same team. So it's been definitely a journey. And so I did a little bit of both. You mentioned changing industries and also changing roles within an industry. So I'll leave it there for now as kind of my recap. Um, yeah.
So so you were a personal trainer when you graduated, right? With your
Yeah.
degree in kinesiology.
Yeah. That's right.
All right. So your parents were talking about like in regards to, yeah, summer is a bit slow for the gym, so you get like how does, like, I go to the gym regularly, right? And I see personal trainers there all the time. Do they get paid per client? It's not paid per hour, right?
It's paid per hour. Yeah.
Oh, it's paid per hour. Okay. So if there's less people booking personal training sessions, then your shifts
That's
start
right.
to dwindle, right? Oh, okay.
That's right.
I'm always curious like how that works because like I'm assuming like you notice that when you're new to a gym, the salesperson tries to sell you some like gym training sessions, right? So I'm just curious like how
Yes.
all that goes about, whether it's like paid by client or paid by hourly. But you've
Yeah.
revealed like how that really works.
Yeah, it's hourly, and so well, when you join a gym, they may even give you a couple of free sessions. So those ones are we also get paid for those. We get paid less, but we do get paid for those. And then after that, you're right, we would try to get clients to purchase a package of X amount of sessions, and then we do get paid per session. But a side note that I'll say for that is that if you're, it depends on how you're set up with your personal training business, because if you're working out of a gym, they will of course take a cut of what you're charging, and they take a pretty steep cut. So you're not seeing that entire amount for anybody who's paying for personal training sessions. We're not seeing 100% of that, but yeah. And so first few weeks of January, very busy. Everyone's real committed to to their goals, and then that kind of slows down, especially as you get into the summertime.
In terms of were you personal training like inside a gym or were you more like a freelance?
Yeah, well, I actually did both. So I started at the gym, and then I ended up doing a little bit more of the freelance piece before moving over to banking.
Do you still have a passion for fitness? So do you have like, is it more of like a side hustle now, or you've just you scrapped that part of your life entirely? Where obviously I'm assuming you still like go to the gym in your spare time, but do you still have like a side hustle, a small client base on top of your asset management job?
Great question. So actually, when I first moved into banking and I was at the branch, I had a really hard time letting go of the fitness industry because I just loved it so much, and I had clients that had been with me for a long time. And so I did. That was actually the freelancing that I did. Was I kept going with them, and I actually had a bit of an online fitness coaching business that I kept going while I was at the branch. But then after a certain amount of time, I did end up letting it go just because it was a little bit much. I ended up going back to school to complete a master's degree, so then it was just not enough time in the day for all of that.
All right. Yeah, fair enough. And are you still doing it right now, or is it just asset
No,
management?
not anymore. I'm just just in the asset management business now.
Okay. Do you miss it? Yeah, like obviously do you miss it, right? But you don't miss it enough that you were willing to like at least do a side hustle with it.
Yeah, I just, what actually the most challenging part about it is having a place to do it out of when you're doing it on your own, because gyms don't like when people come in and do their own personal training, especially if they have their own personal trainers, which I totally understand from a business perspective. And sometimes with some clients, it's hard to just do entirely online, because I actually did have to let go of some clients only because I didn't feel like we had made enough progress for them to have proper form when they're doing things on their own. And I didn't want them to hurt themselves if I wasn't around with them to help out. So it's kind of it's a mixture. It's tough to kind of keep that going when you're kind of not allowed to be in the gym to help out your clients. So it's kind of tough from that end.
For sure. So talking about the banking aspect now, you said like your parents and yourself did some research in terms of like what jobs more stable like over the summertime, because one of the main concerns is that as you know, people go on vacation or they don't want to go in like a gym in the middle of summer. So again, that's when the hours dwindle and you're looking for another opportunity. Walk us through how you did all that research and you decided that banking is the right pivot.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it was a combination of things. So obviously, it's a well, in I guess in banking terminology, it would be a non-cyclical business, and so all that that means is that personal training would be considered cyclical, and so that just means at certain times of the year there's kind of highs and lows to how the business is going, right? So it's slower during some times and busier in other times, which also means less money coming in certain times of the years and versus others. And so banking was one of the ones where it's stable all year long, right? And so you it's a salaried job, you've got a consistent paycheck. I was also looking for things like opportunity for growth because that was one of the things that was, despite my love of the fitness industry and my love for my clients, I was starting to notice that there was a bit of a ceiling in terms of what could be next. So at the time, it seemed like the only way up, so to speak, from where I was to maybe open my own studio gym. But in the town I was living in, everybody was doing that. And it was just way too concentrated. And a lot of the smaller gyms that were trying to open up were also shutting down really quickly just because there were way too many of them. So it just seemed like there wasn't a lot of opportunity for growth. And I'm the kind of person who gets bored kind of quickly, so I could see myself in doing a job for a few years. And then after that, I do need a challenge. I do need something new. So I was looking for that as well. And banking has a lot of that. If you think about banking, people just think sometimes about their banking from their perspective, right? So their bank account, their car loan, their mortgage, their credit card, and they think that that's all there is to it. But honestly, you could probably work 200 years for a bank, which obviously is impossible. But if you did, you still you wouldn't run out of different types of jobs to do within there. So lots of variety, which was great. That's what I was looking for. And then also it was an industry that you didn't necessarily have to go back to school for to get a certain education that would allow you to do that job. And so the reason I say that is because, there are definitely other types of jobs that are stable and there is room to grow. I could be an engineer, I could be, a teacher or something like that, but then I'd have to go back to school. And then so that would set me back at least 4, 5, 6 years before I could actually go into that. So it seemed like a right fit. Plus, I had an interest in money and business and things like that. So it seemed like a decent fit for all of those things that I was looking for. And so I decided to apply.
You make a good point in terms of like really researching the career trajectory of your chosen profession. Like for you, like once you became a personal trainer, like what was the next step? There wasn't really no next step unless you decide to go on your own and uh,
That's right.
start your own gym. And again, like sometimes people don't want to. It's one of those things like if you're like a personal trainer, you like personal training, that's a lot different than trying to run a business as a
Yes,
gym because there you have a whole bunch of other skill sets, and some people might not be into that. They might just be into that one specific thing. And
that's
like
right.
for you, I'm assuming that you realized that that was the only next move, and that wasn't really what you're interested in. And then that's how you did the research and got into banking. I'm assuming that's how it all unfolded.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. And in terms of moving into a different industry, I'm under the assumption that you had no banking experience prior to going to banking. So
That's
how
right.
were you able to get an interview when you don't have banking experience to begin with?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, and it kind of ties into what you were saying about researching a job that you're interested in or researching, your future career, or yeah, your future career or future jobs that you want to have. And so part of that for me was talking to people who are currently doing the job that I'm researching about, right? And so I think I still to this day, I tell people that is the one of the best ways that you can find out information about a job because you can read a job posting and sure, it'll list out the tasks that you're expected to do and the education maybe or experience they're expected to have, but you're really not going to get a good sense of the day to day, of things like, what is the amount of pressure for deadlines, or what is the team dynamic like, or what does a day actually look like for you? Is it actually 9 to 5, or is it 9 to 5 on paper, but really there's an expectation to work longer hours, which is fine for some people, but others who maybe have a family at home or something and they need something more or less flexible, whatever, right? These are good questions to be able to ask that you can only really find out from talking to somebody who's done it or who is doing it currently. So I spoke with somebody who actually, luckily for me at the time, one of the other personal trainers, his brother worked for a bank. And so I opened up to him just about kind of what I was looking to do. And so he said, well, why don't you at least have a phone call with him? So I spoke with him, and so he was kind enough to give me a name of someone who I could apply to directly. And so I submitted my application. And to answer your question, I'm going to share my story about that interview that I had. That was I think it must have been 2 hour, over 2 hours, 2 hours and a half, maybe, of an interview, which is crazy. I mean, I don't think you usually would have interviews that are that long. And the branch manager actually told me afterwards, once I got the job, he said, I was so stressed out. That was the longest interview I ever had to run in my life. And it was such an interesting experience because I had to explain to him, well, it was him and actually another manager. I had to explain to both of them why my experience in personal training was relevant to banking. And so, to your question on how do you go into banking with zero experience, well, the way that I tackled it was not necessarily about the tasks or the knowledge that I had to know from a product perspective, because I assumed that they would have to train me on that anyway, right? Every bank is different and they have different bank accounts and products and interest rates and whatever. So they'd have to tell me all that stuff anyway. But I thought more about what's the type of person and the type of skills that would make a person in banking successful, which is where you have to start thinking about what is it that they're actually doing day to day. So from my conversation that I had with the person that was banking, I learned that it's really about the people that you're interacting with. And so then I took that away and I thought to myself, okay, well, if I'm sitting and I'm dealing with a client who maybe has a lot of debt or has, a goal, a financial goal of some kind, or maybe they're a little bit nervous. A lot of people don't understand finances very well, and so they're kind of shy and scared. There are people that are legitimately scared to go to the bank and talk to somebody. What type of person would I have to be to do well with that, right? And actually be somebody that they can talk to. So I realized I have to be personable. I have to be somebody who's willing to listen carefully, be non-judgmental, be somebody who's kind of trustworthy and who's kind of on their side, and be able to help them reach a goal. And then as I'm an old school paper and pen person. So I was writing all of this out, all of my thoughts that I was having. And I kind of stepped back and I looked at it and I was like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what you need to be a good personal trainer too. Like, I'm already doing that. I have to be a person who is willing to listen and to be judgment free if somebody's, maybe feeling like they're overweight or that they're not, exactly where they want to be fitness wise. They have a fitness goal, right? They might have some feelings of shame or some feelings of nervousness or something. So I'm already doing all of these things. I am that kind of person. And so I just, in researching about the bank, I was able to kind of tie in, okay, here's the type of person that I am, the skills I think that you guys are looking for me to be successful. And here's how I think I would be able to apply that with the types of tasks that you would be expecting me to do. And so after two 2.5 hours and a very long conversation, and it worked out for me. And I remember the manager had even asked me questions. Like he said to me very straightforwardly, he says, that we have hundreds of students that are coming out of a program that teaches them all kinds of stuff about banking. Like, why should I hire you? I was so stressed out. But because of the prep that I did for the interview and all of those things that I had thought about and all the research that I did, I think that really made a big difference. And the person that I had talked to, it made a really big difference for me to be able to make that switch.
So, in regards to the in regards to like how you got the interview, right? Like, I'm a career coach, and one of the things I always talk about is like the benefits of networking, because you
Hmm.
were able to, like, someone. brother that worked at the bank, and then you were able to like get an informational interview, and then it trickled down to an actual interview, and then you're able to sell your transferable skills.
Right.
So one of the things that like people tend to just want to cold apply, and are afraid to talk to people. What's your advice in terms of like the networking aspect for people who are fearful of like reaching out to people to start a conversation and hopefully lead to something greater?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because I do think that networking really makes or breaks your experience sometimes. And I actually think that there's a right and wrong way to do networking as well, because I do think that there are people who, I mean, I've never heard this term before, but I'm just going to coin it now, that almost do something like cold networking, right? Where they just sort of mass connect with people on LinkedIn, or they just sort of, I don't know, they don't do it very thoughtfully, right? They sort of collect people's information and then don't do anything with it, and they call it networking or something like that. You have to understand that what you're actually trying to do is establish a meaningful connection with an actual person that's on the other end of this interaction. And your goal in a world where that person, who, especially if it's an influential person or a hiring manager or something like that, they probably have a lot of people that are trying to network with them as well, and you're become part of their network. So I always try to advise people to ask very thoughtful questions. First, give that person a reason to want to speak with you. Second, ask very thoughtful questions. So put yourself in the shoes of that person, put yourself in the shoes of their business, right? And especially once you get to the interview as well, when they say, "Do you have any questions for us?" Absolutely. Like a common question I would ask is, what's a current problem that your business is trying to solve, or what do you think the next challenge is going to be? These are things that they're already thinking about, and I only came up with that question because I put myself in their shoes, right? So I want to be somebody who's worthwhile to talk to. And also, a sort of unconventional piece of advice that I give about networking is to try to be remembered for something non work related, right? Because it's it's great to ask good questions. I still stand by that, and talk about work related things, but everybody can do that. And I think that when you think about how many people that person that you're talking to interacts with, it's easy to just become one out of a million people that they kind of had this sort of networking chat with. And so if you can connect with things like hobbies, or anything that you might have in common outside of work talk, I think that also helps with them remembering you and then being willing to engage with you in the future again.
So once you got the job, what was your official job title in your first time at a bank?
As a financial advisor.
Okay, financial advisor. Okay, so um, as a financial advisor, obviously it's a huge pivot from personal training. So, what were some of the learning lessons or challenges that you had to overcome in terms of being able to be a good financial advisor when, again, you didn't have any banking experience to start off with?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the main challenges I think were mainly product focused. So I didn't, people would come in with questions, specific questions about their products. So what I mean is, what happens if I don't know, miss a mortgage payment, or what is my interest rate on my loan, or what happens, like just like little things that now to me seem just like a simple thing to answer. But at the time, I didn't really know. It's pretty basic, right? You don't know where to find information. You're brand new, and so you're constantly asking questions, and you feel a little bit lost. I think part of that problem was that they threw me in literally the busiest branch of the city, and so they needed the support so much. They just were booking me appointments on my first day there. Somebody asked me to open a bank account, and I learned a couple of different types of lessons. So one was the product thing. I think was a big challenge. But the second thing that I learned was actually I realized that I was a little bit naive maybe going into this job, because I didn't realize how many people were actually a little bit maybe dishonest with their banking. So, for instance, I opened up a bank account for somebody who, if I had known to ask the right questions, I actually would have refused to even open this bank account for this person, because they had there was a comment on their profile that they had empty enveloped us a bunch of times before, and I didn't even know what that meant, so I sort of ignored it, which I maybe shouldn't have. But it turns out that, this person was trying to deposit money at the ATM, and they said, hey, I deposited 500. They put in an empty envelope, and we do actually release some amount of that money that they can then withdraw right away. So they're basically, defrauding the bank, and I opened them a bank account. So, you learn these kinds of lessons really quickly. I never did that again, that's for sure. But I think there was a little bit of a learning curve too, not to be so trusting, and to make sure that I'm doing good due diligence when I'm dealing with clients at the bank.
I did that by accident when I was young. I think it's either high school or middle school. So I was trying to deposit $40, but I thought I had to type in the zeros for the cents. So I ended up writing I deposited $4,000. So that's what happened there. I think they fixed it. Again, I wasn't like
Honest
this person
mistake.
who just withdrew the money right away. I just thought it was an honest mistake.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was an honest mistake on my part. And then like they fixed up the balance once I took out money, like maybe a few days later. So
perfect.
I wasn't trying to defraud them. It was just like naive on my side, but like
Yeah.
I yeah, but you've learned that a lot of people are trying to game the bank, and through experience, you're able to see like uh, some of the bad clients, so to speak.
Yeah, you just kind of learn things about people right along the way. And I think that probably happens in any industry. You interact, especially when you interact with the public, right? You really get a whole range of personalities and things that come through the door. And so it's all a good experience. But yeah, it was definitely, I remember that being part of my learning curve when I first started.
In terms of like transferable skills, whether it's personal training or banking as a financial advisor, both of them you have to deal with people. So, what are some like common traits that you notice when it comes to working with people in personal training and working with people as a financial advisor?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The first one that comes to mind is, well, there's two. One of them is that you're technically in sort of an advisory role in both of those jobs. You're advising people on how to work out better and eat better and all that, and you're advising people on how to deal with their finances. And what I learned about people in both of those cases is that people don't really know what they really want or what they really need necessarily, which is why they usually come to somebody for advice, which is great. But people are also kind of stubborn. So they think they know what to do, but yet they turn to you for help. And it's kind of a little bit of this tense situation. As an example, I had sorry, I don't mean to laugh. I had a personal training client who said to me that she doesn't, she says, listen, I'm not gonna change the way that I eat because I'm just not. And I don't want to sweat because I hate that, but I want to lose 40 pounds. So you have to help me. And I just didn't know what to say. People they're a little bit stubborn, so you kind of have to break through that a little bit and be calm and explain to them that it doesn't work that way. And so there's a little bit of a barrier there sometimes. And the other thing that I remember learning about people is that uh, a lot of times I would say that anytime you're dealing with the public, this would be true. A lot of times they really just want to get whatever's on their mind off of their mind. So they just want to be heard. And if you can listen first, truly listen with no agenda, which is hard sometimes in a sales position, because in both of those cases they were technically sales positions. It's hard to listen first, but if you listen and you don't approach them with sort of a pushy sales energy, they're way more likely to trust you, to listen to your advice because they've got everything off of their chest and now they feel like they've been heard and now they're ready to listen. So, from a people managing perspective, not managing, but working with people perspective, those are two big things that I learned.
Yeah, one of the things that you talked about just now is like everybody thinks like, oh, I can eat the same. I just need to go to the gym. But a lot of the weight and when it comes to losing weight, a lot of it has to do with nutrition. Like the gym is more secondary, but people think that they can eat the same thing and then
That's
just
right.
work out more and then they'll lose the weight. But obviously, as you know from experience, that's not the case.
Yeah, they say abs are made in the kitchen, right? But unfortunately, most people are not with their personal trainer when they're in the kitchen, and so it takes a lot of more willpower to get that part right.
So you're talking about like how some people are afraid to like go to the bank, or another
Yeah.
example is like they're afraid to go to the dentist. like how do you like help open them up so they become so they can give you the right information that you need in order to help them with their financial goals?
Oh, I would say I would say that the non-judgment piece really comes into play, and I guess another way of saying that would be to really just meet them where they are as a starting point, and then just taking little steps from there, and trying not to overwhelm them. And one of the sort of I guess life hacks or tricks, it's not really a trick though, I hate to call it that, but one of the strategies, maybe I could say, that I used in banking especially, I would say, is to I don't really know the official term for this, but uh, to sort of mimic people's body language a little bit, and also the language that they use, the vocabulary that they use. And so what I mean by that is I've seen situations where a financial advisor is who's very knowledgeable, of course, in their role, meets with a client who's maybe brand new. You know, they finally worked up the courage to come in and talk about their loan or whatever, and they're asking questions however they know how to. And the financial advisor tries to show off with a lot of big words and a lot of complicated details and things like that. And really, that's just making the situation worse. And you can see that the client is just closing up even more because now they're feeling intimidated and now they're feeling completely not motivated to ever come back. So I don't think that's a way to build trust with a client. So what I would do instead is I would just keep it really simple, right? Again, making them or allowing them to speak first and being the person to listen, truly just listen and sit back and not say anything, allowed me to hear and gauge where that person is at in terms of their comfort level, their level of understanding, their level of stress, even, right? Sometimes I would even crack a few jokes, or I would try to level with them and say, hey, yeah, I completely understand. At one point in my life, I also, when I was a student, maybe I had no idea how my student loan worked. Someone just told me to sign and I signed, and whatever. I didn't know what to do next. And so that builds rapport. And I think that that really helps in any kind of case, right? With personal training as well. Start small, start where they are, and then slowly build from there.
So I want to move to the last part of your career pivot, which is asset management. So how did you get to that stage of your banking career?
Great question. So my experience at the branch was, I would say there was a steep learning curve, like I said, with all of the products and services and everything, because that role required you to be really a jack of all trades. You had to know a little bit about every part of banking. And then, if there was a case where there was some complex needs from the client, you would then maybe send to an expert or something. But really, whatever walks through the door, you have to be ready to answer. And so the benefit of that was I got some experience in a whole bunch of different parts of the bank, and it helped me decide which ones were most interesting to me. And that's what allowed me to decide what I wanted to pursue further. And investments were by far the most interesting to me because I just find it fascinating to understand how the markets work. The fixed income market, the stock markets, and definitely a thing that will never get boring. Right? There's always exciting stuff happening in the markets. So that was good for me, and just something that I found interesting to learn about. But also because from a client perspective, I had the most positive, some of my most positive experiences with clients were thanks to our investment conversations that we had. So, as an example, I remember having a client in my office who came in crying, actually, saying that she was never going to be able to retire. She was never going to be able to meet her grandchildren because they live somewhere far away, and she only has 2 weeks or 1 week off or something, probably two a year, not enough time to ever get there and spend time with them. She can't afford it. She'll have to work until she dies. All of these things that she was saying and bawling in my office. And again, after a lot of taking it easy, listening, building rapport, whatever, we ended up having a serious conversation about where she was at financially. We made a plan and we made it manageable for her. And she came back one day and she actually cried again. But this time it was tears of joy because she said, I'm actually going to be able to retire. And I submitted my paperwork to retire at X age. And I wouldn't have been able to do it without our plan. So just really impactful. And I knew that by investing properly financially, you're investing in yourself properly, you can really make a difference in somebody's life. So that's what made me want to pursue asset management. And then again, though, from a practical perspective on how I actually got there from the branch, it took a lot of networking effort on my part. It took a lot of proactive booking career chats, coffee chats with anybody and everybody that I could come across. If it was a conversation where at the end I decided that is absolutely not what I ever want to do in my career, at least I knew that now. And I would ask them, hey, this was a great conversation. Is there anybody else you can think of that I could have a conversation with? And they 100% of the time said yes. And I just kept that ball rolling until I basically made it to people who were in the asset management division. And I kept that relationship going. And then eventually, when it came to apply, I reached out to that person and I said, hey, what do you think? Help me out. Is there anyone else I can talk to? Would you support me for applying this? And they did. And it was a bit of an unconventional move from the branch to head office after only a couple of years at the branch, but it worked out really well. And I couldn't be happier.
A lot of people try to, like, for example, let's say they want to work at corporate Apple, right? They want to start off at the store and then try to move up into corporate. And you start off at like the front end, which is working at the branch as a financial advisor, and then you're moving to head office. And the one thing that you mentioned was even though you were an internal candidate, you still had to do a lot of networking. Basically, I think you had to do more than what you did before and to go from personal training to banking. People assume that if you're already inside the company, it becomes a lot easier because you're an internal candidate. But from your example, that's not necessarily true. You actually may have to do more just to help you stand out.
Yeah. And, I'm so happy you said that, Max, because I remember back at the branch when we were hiring, even for a branch position, I remember my branch manager saying to me, and I think it was to our whole team, because we were just kind of asking how the recruiting was going and whatever. They said that internal applicants actually performed so much worse in interviews than external applicants because they felt like they had an unbeatable advantage for just because they were internal. And when they were asked about, it's okay, so tell me about what you think this job is all about, they had no idea. Like just ridiculous because for anybody who's applying externally, the very first thing you would do is look up the job and at least know what you're applying for, right? And so I 100% agree that just because you are an internal candidate, it doesn't mean that you should be any less prepared or that it takes any less research or anything to apply. And I actually think it's a good best practice to even just do this type of research about different roles, maybe not as intensely as I did because I was actively trying to move into a different role, but even just casually, maybe once a quarter or a couple times a year, book a meeting with somebody that's in a totally different part of your company just to learn and see if there's something that would be of interest to you or to somebody that you know, right? Because another part of networking is that it doesn't always have to be you that benefits. You can provide value to other people by being the one that connects two people together, right? If you know someone who's hiring for X, you know someone who's looking to apply for X, you can be that person. And now you've done something nice for them and they'll remember you and it's all great from there. So
You make a good point about the giving value, right? A lot of people don't want to network because they don't think that they're giving any value. They're the ones extracting a lot of information, and they don't believe that there's any value that they can offer because they're trying to get an opportunity while this person is willing to listen to give them information that they need. So again, like you've already provided an example of like you could be the connector, but what other ways can you provide value to someone who's willing to give their time up to talk to you about potential opportunities in their department or team?
uh, well, I think that there's nothing wrong in actually asking them how you could provide value. I think that's it's a fair question to ask them. It really depends on who it is that you're talking to. I would say, From an entrepreneurship perspective, or a networking perspective in general, you can ask the person, how can I support your business, right? Can I promote your business for you? Is there a certain type of role that you're hiring for right now that maybe I know somebody, or anything like that, even from an outside of work perspective, right? Maybe you find out that they're, I don't know, looking for uh I don't know, like a summer camp for their kids to go to, and you could reach out to someone and help them, like whatever. It can be the best way that you can provide value to somebody is by understanding what they value first, I guess is what I would say. And so the more you can find out about during your conversation with them, the more that this answer becomes obvious on how you can provide value.
And in terms of you going from branch to the corporate office, what were some like environmental changes from the workplace that you've experienced? For example, if, again, like going back to the Apple example, what's the difference between working at the store, where you interact with a lot of customers, compared to like head office or corporate? Like, so, what was the environment change for you, and how were you able to adapt?
So there were a few. So the first one, which I know probably everybody on earth, minus essential workers experience, was working from home for the first little while. I actually joined head office as a full work from home during the pandemic lockdown time, actually. And I didn't meet my team for at least a year. So I think, there was a lot of also proactivity in terms of getting to know them virtually. It took some extra effort from a team building perspective, I would say. But in general, the entire structure of my team was also different than I was used to. So at the branch, it was very hierarchical, where you always reported to someone who reported to someone who reported to someone. And if you needed anything to get done, you knew you only had your manager to go to, and then you had to wait for all the levels to get cleared, before something got done. Over here at national office, it's definitely more of a matrix structure. So I, for the first time ever, was interacting directly with people that were at the VP level, president level, CEO level of different divisions of the bank. And that was a little bit intimidating at first. And there were definitely some lessons to be learned there, because as much as we hate to admit it was a little bit, it exposed me to some corporate politics, I guess, not in a negative way, but just in a, like you said, environmental change kind of way, where I had to be a little bit more sensitive to where I am in the structure, and, being sensitive about sharing certain information, or, just communicating with people differently. So there was a little bit of that at play as well. So there was a bit of a learning curve there. But honestly, I have to say, in my experience, especially, I had great people to help me through all of it. So it wasn't entirely scary, but definitely different than the branch environment.
So, and in terms of like you working now at asset management in the head office, what are some like things that you could share in terms of advice for someone who's like just starting off like in a bank, as someone working in a branch, or working in like a retail aspect of the business? What's some advice that you can give in terms of like helping them accelerate and move in the career
Mhm.
ladder at that company?
So the biggest piece of advice that I would give is to not not just accept that there's one path within the bank. And to anyone working in banking, they'll know exactly what I mean, because when you start at the branch as a financial advisor, then usually there's a typical path that you would follow. So maybe then you become a senior financial advisor, then you're a financial planner, then you become a assistant branch manager. And so there's this sort of path that you see everybody following. And the one of the main catalysts for my career path was that I refused to accept that as the only way, because I knew that that was not what was in the cards for me. I didn't want that. And that didn't mean that I had to leave the bank. And I think some people do, because they're just not attracted to that path for themselves. So I sort of took my career in my own hands. And I would say that that is advice that applies to anybody, anywhere, because you have to actively and proactively think about what it is that you actually want and what are the proactive steps you have to take to get there. And there's a lot that you can do on your own. You don't have to rely on your manager to hold your hand through it, so to speak. Although I would recommend being open and honest with your manager about your career plans, because one of the lessons that I learned as well is that you're really not going to get very far without the support of your manager, because the first thing they're going to do when you apply for a role is call your manager. And if they don't know that you're applying for these head office roles, it's just going to end very quickly. So that's one piece of advice. And then the networking piece, I have to say, is huge. Just to even, I consider this internal research, right? Just like I did all that research, and anybody should, if you're applying externally to a role, do your internal research and follow through on the things that people advise you, because they're speaking from experience. Most people probably have been where you are earlier in their career, and they're 100% willing to pay it forward and to have a chat with you. Don't be scared or nervous to ask, because they understand, right? And they want to help. So don't be afraid to take that leap of faith, and yeah, like I said, take your career journey into your own hands and make it happen.
The common theme that you've discussed throughout our discussion today is that your relationships is what helped you with your career, not the hard work. Like the hard work does play a part, but it's not the main focus. A lot of young professionals think that it's about the hard work, and then they get frustrated when they're not getting those promotions, etc.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And I've actually, I mean, I always knew that that was important, but I think I only ever thought about it from a networking perspective before, in terms of building relationships, versus now I'm really learning over the last, I would say, maybe 3 years or so, that even the working relationship that you have with the people that are on your team, and any stakeholders, let's say if you're working on a project, or your manager, if you show up excellently for them, then they are going to show up for you if you ever need support, or anything like that. And I think when it comes to building good relationships, I think one of the things that I learned is you will get a lot further by working in a supportive way with your team and making them look good and making your boss look good than you are if you were to throw them all under the bus and try to make yourself look good. That is like, you can only play that card once, I think, and then you're burning bridges, and it's just not the way to go. And then nobody's going to like you and want to work with you, right? So building those positive relationships and actually trying to hype them up more than you hype yourself up actually gets you a whole lot further going forward. So I mean, I could talk about that for a while, but 100% agree. Relationships should be the focus when it comes to thinking about your career.
And as we are hitting close to the hour, I really appreciate your time, Gabby, for coming on my podcast to discuss your career journey. So I want to wrap up our conversation with one last question for you. As I stated earlier, my podcast is about helping professionals overcome career challenges. So my question to you is like, throughout your whole career journey, what was one big challenge that you had to overcome to get to where you are today?
So my one of my biggest challenges, or the biggest challenge, was, I think, my confidence in myself, because I didn't find it hard to work hard. I never really found it too hard to work with people and build good relationships. But actually, believing in myself and taking the steps forward that I knew I had to take, but I felt like maybe I wasn't good enough yet, or I hadn't worked hard enough yet, or I wasn't educated enough yet to do. Uh, that, I think, is what could have held me back, and maybe did hold me back in the first little while. But I'm happy to say that I had people that helped me get past that. My manager at the branch was one of them, because the first role that I actually applied for in national office, I remember reading the job posting, and you know how there's the must haves and then the nice to haves usually on a job posting. I had all of the must haves, And then I had all except for one of the nice to haves. And that one that I didn't have basically just said, has experience with this specific website or has used this website before. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my gosh, I can't apply. Like, I don't check all the boxes. I've never seen this website before and I haven't used it. So obviously I can't do this job. And thinking back now, I'm so happy that I didn't let that stop me. But it, you know, it almost did. Like, I almost didn't apply. And I have to say that they've done a lot of studies now and shown that women are actually more susceptible to this than men for the most part, where unless they check 100% of the boxes, they won't apply for a job, and they kind of have that confidence piece hold them back. So, lots of support from good people around me that helped me get past that, and a lot of mindset changes that I had to work through over time. And I'm still not 100% done for sure, but definitely one that I've been working on over the last handful of years in my career.
And how can people reach out to you to learn more about your career journey and what you can do to help them? We discussed earlier that you do have a podcast yourself. So why don't you talk about more of like your endeavors and your business ventures?
For sure, yeah. So on my podcast, like I said earlier, is called Mindset Over Matter. And I also actually have a website called thegoodinggroup.com, where I'm just starting out, but I'm hoping to do I'm hoping to do more professional coaching with folks to help them with exactly this type of stuff, preparing for interviews and helping them with their job search and their career journeys, and even business owners someday. I would like to help them with that. So the business is called The Gooding Group. My podcast is called Mindset Over Matter if you want to check it out.
Is it a new podcast, by the way, or it's been up for a while?
It's relatively new, actually. Yeah. So I've only got about a dozen episodes out, but I have to say I've got, I think, probably the rest of the calendar year booked out with episodes and guests. So I'm super stoked about that. It's definitely gaining some momentum. So feel free to check it out. There's going to be a lot of great stuff coming out.
And as a fellow podcaster, what made you decide to start a podcast?
That is such a great question. So what made me want to start a podcast was the fact that I just felt like there were already in my short career, because I recognize that I'm young and just kind of starting out, but there were so many great things that I've learned that I just wanted to share with people. And I didn't want to necessarily just pester people that I work with and my friends and family, because they get to hear me rant about stuff enough. But I just thought, this is stuff that has helped me so much. If I can just get it out there and maybe it'll help somebody else as well, or maybe somebody can relate. I really want to do that and at least feel like I've done my part. And it's actually evolved a little bit from that already. I'm really excited about the guests that are going to be coming on, because the main thing that I want to hear from them too is exactly that. What are the lessons that you wish you'd learned earlier in your life, or that made the biggest difference for you in your life? And I just want to get it out there so that other people can benefit as well.
Awesome. I look forward to listening to maybe an episode or two, and best of luck in growing that podcast and your business venture.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Max. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for watching. For more content on careers, job search, and self-improvement, make sure to hit that subscribe button.